It's starting. Oh,
Awesome. So, Susan, it's super exciting, first of all, to meet you, like kind of in person, because we've been interacting on Twitter for a couple weeks, months now. I can't remember when I first started following you. And once I started following you on Twitter, I realized that I had actually been reading your blog for years without realizing that's who you were.
okay, cool. That's great. Yeah, I love your blog too, and your Twitter posts.
Awesome. It's been such a unexpected delight to understand like how many ways there are to use Twitter that don't involve just like shouting into a void about politics or something. I have no idea. This is really exciting. So first of all, huge congratulations on your new book, Finding a New Normal, and Living Your Best Life with Chronic Illness. I love the title, first of all.
Oh,
How did
thank
you
you.
come up with that?
I think I mentioned this in the introduction, but my it actually dates back to my first pregnancy. When I had my first son, I have two sons, and when the first was born, I went in for my 6-week checkup with my OBGYN, and I was like, I was exhausted. I was still wearing maternity clothes. I was just a mess. And I was like, when are things going to return to normal? And she's this really nice person who just like really gently said, well, it's a new normal now. So, once I got sick and my sons got sick and we started dealing with all this, I realized it's the same thing. Oh, life's not going to return to the old normal, but, there's this new normal that we can work with.
Absolutely. When you were, you're working, you mentioned that you were an engineer, you had had this like really interesting career. Had you gone through any health issues that had given you a taste of what chronic illness life would be like, or did this all come as just like a huge shock?
Oh, I'm like what they say 75 to 80% of MECFS patients,
Yeah,
can tell you the exact day I got sick. And
really.
before that, I was perfectly healthy. Um, Now, Dr. David Bell mentioned this to me. He was one of the top experts when I first got sick. He's retired now. Uh,
Hmm.
and he was absolutely the top pediatric expert in the world. But he had said, even though people know the exact date that it started, usually when they look back, they can see some clues.
Right.
Definitely, I was like that. Like there were signs that my immune system was overreacting.
Okay.
I got poison ivy one summer and I couldn't get rid of it for weeks. And it finally took 2 courses of steroids, oral steroids, for me to finally get rid of it.
Yeah.
Um, my second pregnancy, at the end of it, with this big 9-month pregnant belly, I broke out in this horrible itchy rash all over my belly.
Hmm.
And my doctor explained, she said, when this happens, it's basically your immune system's rejecting the pregnancy, the baby.
Right.
And it was torture for the last weeks of pregnancy. And, so in hindsight, I can look back and go, oh, but at the time, it
Right.
didn't seem like any big deal.
No, that's really interesting. And one of the things that I've always loved about your blog is the fact that you're able to distill pretty complex medical issues, like your deep dives into POTS and exercise intolerance,
Yeah.
glutathione, cytokine storms, inflammation, all this stuff. I was just so impressed with your ability to take these really intense, very serious medical concepts and break them down into a way that like the reader could digest. How did you get there? Because like when I first got sick, my mom did everything for me. I had no idea what was going on. I was so brain foggy. The idea that I could like wrap my head around going to a doctor's appointment and like somehow pay attention and like take notes and then apply it to my own life was just baffling and so overwhelming. So like what was that process like for you?
Well, first, I'm lucky that my brain fog has never been as severe as what you're describing.
Okay.
Certainly on the and my illness has always been very up and down.
Hmm.
Even in the beginning, which is part of what made it so frustrating and difficult to understand. I'd feel fine one day,
Yeah.
and try to resume my normal life and then, crash again. And certainly when I was badly crashed, your brain just gets, there's no way to describe it, because you've experienced it.
Well, especially for you, you're this like high performing, intelligent, like hardworking person. You're like, what is happening to me? Right?
For me, one of the big things I find in terms of brain fog is a lack of mental clarity.
Okay.
Like I lose all my motivation. I can think. I've never lost the ability to read, for instance, as I know some people do. But, everything is just such hard mental work when I'm crashed. Yeah. The good thing is, I think what you're describing, in translating scientific or medical information for the layperson, I think my background helps with that.
Yeah.
I was a chemical engineer. I was a chemical engineer with a minor in technical communications. So I've always loved to write. Yeah. So I had both sides of it. I had the technical side and the writing side. I had always loved to write. When I got sick, I had actually left my job voluntarily 2 years earlier, just because we had two little kids and we were running around like crazy. And I was traveling a lot and life was just too hectic. So, we figured, we've got enough savings for maybe a year and a half. And, I stopped working for a little while. And the plan was, I'd go back.
Right.
When our savings ran out. And at the 2-year point, that's when I got sick.
Oh my gosh.
So I was never able to go back to the kind of work that I used to do. I did manage to get one tiny consulting job locally. And the people I was working with were just great. They were a really small company. So I said, I can only come in the morning because I have to nap in the afternoon. They were like, that's fine. We've got 20 employees. We don't want you here all day. So I did a little bit of work a few years later, but for the most part, I was never able to go back to that. But I think that background is what helped me to be able to, translate some of this for other patients. And part of it's my personality. My first instinct is I want to understand things better.
Yeah.
I want to learn. I want to gain more knowledge. I really believe knowledge is power.
For sure.
Especially with a crazy illness like this, the better you understand it, sometimes even just understanding it can help improve your condition.
Absolutely.
So, I
well,
was motivated.
Sorry.
Okay.
One of the themes in your book is developing resilience and finding ways to understand your condition so that you're not, frankly, miserable all the time. Because I think when I look back at the first time I was diagnosed, my doctor said something like, if you're lucky, you'll get over this, or you'll maybe achieve 70 to 80% recovery within 2 years. And at that point, I was like, 2 years? Are you kidding me? Like the prospect of spending 2 years mildly sick just horrified me. And I honestly, if you had told me that I would still be dealing with these health problems 11 years later, I would have been like, there's no way. I will be a miserable, horrible human being. I will be just an absolute nightmare to be around. There's no way. And it's not that I necessarily enjoy being sick, but I am always continually surprised by the human ability to basically become resourceful in these crises and find ways to find meaning, to connect with other people like we've done through Twitter, to share knowledge with other people, to find some way to transcend all this pain and make something better out of it, even if this is not the career path, life path, whatever that you chose.
Right. And that goes back again to the title that I feel, really has some deep meaning for me because, yeah, I agree with you. When I first got sick, I was trying to see all these different specialists. And, when I found out I'd have to wait 2 months to see an infectious disease specialist, I was, mind blown. I was like, I can't wait 2 months. Here I am 18 years later. So, so I think, humans are pretty amazing in our resilience and our ability to adjust to a new situation. Look what's going on right now.
Yeah.
it's not the best time to release a new book, I can tell you. People are a little distracted.
Right.
Um, but in another way, it's been interesting because all this stuff I've written about chronic illness is suddenly a lot of it is applicable to everyone, including healthy people. Everyone's isolated. What's that?
You're an expert on this.
Yeah.
You spent the last 18 years preparing for quarantine.
Exactly. I think I said that a few times at the beginning. I was like, we've been training for this.
I'm uniquely positioned to like excel in this environment. I'm not like happy about it necessarily, but I'm prepared at least. Well, and what I love about your story and like what you were mentioning earlier is that you've drawn on your previous experiences and your own like just attitude toward life in general and use that to your advantage when it comes to tackling this huge, complex chronic illness, not only for yourself, but also for your sons.
Yeah, well, talk about motivation. When it's one thing to want to get well yourself, when your kids get sick, and they were only 6 and 10 when they first got sick.
Oh my gosh, that's heartbreaking.
Yeah, it was. And to see them going from, normal, healthy, active, energetic kids to suddenly, not wanting to get up off the couch, not being able to get up off the couch. Like you just said, it was heartbreaking. And, that was extra motivation that, I don't know, like I said, part of it's just my personality. There must be something we can do is just kind of the way I look at things. And, we were lucky to be able to see some of the top experts, or if not see them, at least consult with them by phone. I took my son up to see Dr. Bell. He was the world's top pediatric ME/CFS expert at the time, but he happened to be like less than an hour from my hometown in Western New York, Rochester. It's where I grew up. So, we went up and stayed with my dad and my stepmom and went over to his office. So we were lucky to have that opportunity. And then he told us about Dr. Rowe at Johns Hopkins, Dr. Peter Rowe, who is, now that Dr. Bell's retired, Dr. Rowe's pretty much the world's top pediatric expert, but also one of the top experts for adults and children on orthostatic intolerance as of ME/CFS. So even when we first called him, trying to think how long ago it was, 14 years ago, even at that time, his practice was full and he couldn't take new patients. But he was so kind and has been through the last, all those years. He helped us out over the phone. He gave advice to our doctor. He spent 2 hours on the phone with our pediatrician, teaching her about orthostatic intolerance in kids and how to treat it. And because she had never encountered any of this before. We did get very fortunate, I think, in that we never really encountered doctors who didn't believe us. Mm-hmm. Like my son's pediatrician, she had never dealt with ME/CFS before. But she knew I had it. And my sons had been her patients since they were born. She knew us as a family. And she never for a moment, I hear some of these horror stories. And our doctors never for a moment doubted that we were really sick and that, and that it was real. So I feel fortunate in that.
Yeah. Well, and I love that you've been able to share all this knowledge that you've gleaned over the years. You've been so fortunate to interact with all these incredible physicians. You've had people who've taken you seriously. I mean, I've been very lucky that I've had doctors who maybe don't know what to do with me, but I haven't had to deal with the dismissiveness and just the disrespect that so many people in the chronic illness community encounter on a regular basis. It's awful. And I love that you've taken this chance to write this blog. You've done so much work on orthostatic intolerance, which has been very helpful for me. Because like you said, it's really uncommon to see it in patients like us. I was talking to one of my friends who's in med school, and he's like, "You were at a tilt table test, like at your age? What? That doesn't happen." Were all the doctors just fascinated by your case? Like, we're these like medical anomalies that have all these strange confluence of conditions that you normally wouldn't see in somebody who's like an 18-year-old female, but
Right.
it is.
And I think you put your finger on one of the really critical issues that, if you can get diagnosed properly and treat orthostatic intolerance, it underlies so many of our symptoms.
Mm-hmm.
We may not be aware of it, but, it's behind the scenes.
Right.
And so that's one of several things that just had such a huge impact on improving our lives, especially when the boys were little kids. Treating OI was like magic. It got both of them back to school.
Right. And there's some place, I think it's on your blog where I first saw it, where it's just like, maybe ME/CFS as a whole doesn't have this one single silver bullet cure, but there are all these separate components of the illness that are treatable, or there are at least ways where you can improve the quality of life. And I think orthostatic intolerance is one of those things where you just can have really huge gains if you are able to work with the right physicians and figure out the right interventions.
Absolutely. And, another really important thing to understand is that we're all so different.
Absolutely.
And even with like, OI is really an umbrella term. It covers lots of different, specific conditions under it, like POTS, neurally mediated hypotension, and other things. Some things that don't even fit neatly into a label. But if the other piece of that, besides getting a doctor to help you, is patience and persistence. Just, so often I hear someone say, "Oh yeah, I tried beta blockers, they didn't work." And when we start talking about it, I find out, their doctor had them try one
Mm-hmm.
at one dose, and either there were side effects or it wasn't effective, and that was it.
Yeah.
As there are like 40 different beta blockers out there, plus other meds in similar categories.
Mm-hmm.
So, you have to just keep trying. And that kind of trial and error can be difficult when you're so sick, but it is the way to find, the right solution for you.
Yeah, it's tough. I'll often joke with my friends that like being sick is exhausting. Like, set aside just the normal symptoms. It's just the management, the taking care of yourself, the following up with doctor's appointments, the reviewing your lab tests and making sure that everything's working, and then that constant trial and error. And then there are some points where you're just like, you know what? This isn't going to be my path right now. Like, I'm going to just take a break and I'm going to pause right now because this is exhausting and
Absolutely.
to do all that.
Yeah, you're right. And I think I mentioned there's a chapter in the book about just the constant mental exhaustion of always monitoring yourself, and this is something that definitely my healthy extended family does not understand, that, when we're like at a gathering with healthy people, and, we don't want to make people feel uncomfortable, and we want to try to enjoy this, limited social interaction that we get.
Mm-hmm.
But it takes so much internal effort to, you're thinking, how am I feeling right now? Do I need to sit down? Am I starting to get dizzy? Am I feeling worn out? And it's just this constant internal dialogue. And, it's necessary to protect ourselves, but it's exhausting. It's mentally exhausting.
It's very tiring. Yeah, and one of the things I really enjoyed about your book, it's like this choose your own adventure sort of figure out what you're dealing with right now, and then like you have basically a chapter that covers pretty much every possible like emotional response or physical ailment or something that somebody might be going through. And so what I loved about reading it is that, yeah, there are times when I need that support because I feel like, no, this sucks. I feel like I should be more resilient, but right now, whatever is going on, whether it's a disappointment or something else, that's been really tough. And you had a chapter about dealing with disappointments, not only for yourself, but also like watching your sons go through these periods of missing out on things. Like what were some of the tools and things that helped you get through those periods?
A lot of it is, and there are chapters in the book on each of these, but some of it is, just learning to live in the moment and to be present.
Hmm.
And I mean, some of it, unfortunately, is practice.
Right.
You go through enough times things being canceled, and you just start to get used to, this is my life. I have to adjust. I think one of the things that's helped me the most, there's a chapter in here called a Plan B day.
Yeah.
That like required a whole shift in, the way I think.
Yeah.
Because
How
I
came up with that, first of all? I think that's such a cool name, first of all.
don't know. I just, it was one of those days when I had this whole list of plans and I woke up feeling awful.
Hmm.
Sometimes when I first wake up, I don't even realize how bad I feel.
Yeah.
I'll like, wash up and brush my teeth and get dressed and rush downstairs and make breakfast. And then I sit down and I'm like, oh. All of a sudden I realize I am achy all over. My body feels heavy. My throat hurts a little bit. I'm, all these warning signs of mine. But I tend to be, just naturally a very active, driven kind of person, and I live by my to-do list.
Right.
So it was just, one of those bad crash days. It just occurred to me, I can't do these things,
Hmm.
My husband's been a big help in that because he's often the one to say, no, no, you're not going to the store.
I'd actually love to hear more about that because so I'm single, like, I've dealt with relationships in my family and my friendships, but what's it like being married and having a chronic illness?
I mean, it's challenging like every other aspect. And, during the worst years, there were four of us in the family, and he was the only functioning, healthy person. So it was really hard for him. He's also said it's really hard that no one around him understands.
Yeah.
So his closest friend, um, who he's out socially distant golfing with right now,
That's
uh,
amazing.
Pennsylvania just opened their golf courses. That's like, we live right near the border. So we're
Okay.
in Delaware, but his friend is in Pennsylvania. So they haven't been able to golf together in months.
Oh.
But anyway, you know, his family had dealt with Lyme disease, pretty
Yeah.
much the whole family. So it really helped him to have that one friend that really did understand, that he'd be at work and trying to function, but in his mind, he's got a wife and two kids at home that can't get up. And I mean, I say in the book, and it's true, there were some really dark days,
Hmm.
and we struggled at the beginning very much, especially after both kids got sick. Um, but you just have to develop coping mechanisms. You just can't live in that dark place all the time.
Hmm.
And luckily, like I said, the nature of my illness has always been up and down. So even though I don't have good days where I feel 100% like my old self, I do still have good days where I can function with the treatments that we've got now. You know, on my good days, I can function, I can meet up with friends, I can do things. Um, and I think that helps a lot because I know when the bad days come, you know, I know some people struggle with just every day the same and never feeling well. And I think that would be, a whole lot more difficult. But, in that case, I think it's even more important that you've got some emotional coping mechanisms. Um, and some of the things like just paying attention to your surroundings, tuning into nature, whether you're just lying in a chair on your back deck or even just, opening a window near your bed. Things like listening to bird song, watching the clouds can really help to center you and calm you, and just finding the things that bring you joy.
Yeah, you talk about your joy journal in the book, which I love.
Yes. Actually, one of the first things I did have, as I was telling you earlier, a professional editor helped me edit the book. And one of the things she said right off the bat was, "You use the word joy too much." And I was like, well, that's what the book's about. So I really had to struggle with not constantly saying joy, because it's a big part of, living your best life with chronic illness, is learning to find those small moments of joy, whether it's, a hug from your kid, or, watching something funny on TV, reading a good book. No matter how limited you are, you have to find something that can bring you joy and calm and peace.
Yeah, I often tell my friends that like chronic illness is just this constant exercise in adjusting expectations. And when I think about my life now and what I thought I'd be doing and what I thought would be bringing me joy, which was like climbing mountains and taking crazy kayaking trips and sailing around the world and having some crazy job and like just doing all these like flashy, high intensity things. And now I look at my life and I'm like, oh yeah, stuff that brings me joy is going to the park and going for a walk with a friend, or throwing a frisbee, or right now I just love cooking. So
Right.
when I have the chance to cook meals with another friend or have a group of people for dinner or something like that, but it's much, smaller in a way than I thought my life was going to be, this like super huge flashy thing. But the fact that I've been able to find joy in these like unexpected ways has been such a treat, because there were times when, at least in the early days of my illness, I didn't realize how important the interpersonal connection side of all this stuff. I don't think I realized just how much the isolation compounded all my symptoms.
Right, absolutely. And I think the rest of the world is discovering that right now. This, what you just said, this concept of finding joy within a smaller world, and, and the importance of social connection. And, it's something we live with every day that I think, it's kind of funny, not funny, but weird right now that, you're on Facebook or something, or talking to a friend, and, they're saying things that you've been living with for years. They're finding ways of, being happy in their own home, or getting joy out of a walk around the neighborhood. And, it's a big part of how we live all the time.
Right. And I found that people who normally would be going out to bars or doing something in public to see friends are now totally open to doing Zoom chats and Skype meetings. And I hope that's something that carries over after this, because when I think about everybody within this chronic illness community, how great would it be if our friends were willing to reach out in these like virtual ways that didn't require as much energy for us, but still foster that same amount of connection?
Right. I hope some of it hangs around too, because I think that's been eye-opening for a lot of people. And I've seen two different kinds of reactions from the chronic illness community. A lot of people are thrilled that their friends finally get it. I run a parents group online. Well, I'm not the head of it anymore, but I started it. And one mom was saying recently that her teen son has been isolated and stuck at home for years. And all of a sudden, with the pandemic, he's hearing online from friends that he hasn't heard from in ages.
Yeah.
They're in the same position now, and they're saying to him, "Oh man, you've been living like this," And she just said, her son was thrilled and getting so much social interaction online that he doesn't usually get.
Mm-hmm.
I've also heard from patients who are really angry, that that the rest of the world is just now getting it and never paid attention before, or that services are all of a sudden available.
Yes.
Delivery services, online services, things like that, our illnesses are often called invisible, and I think that really is true to the larger society.
Mm-hmm.
For me personally, I try really hard not to get caught up in anger and resentment. Um, it can be hard, sometimes, especially if personally, if somebody, doesn't really understand what your life is like, or what you're trying to explain to them. But I just find that those kind of negative emotions just make me sicker. So that's the time to step outside, look up at the sky, take a deep breath, and try to focus on joy.
Absolutely. And I understand what you're saying, because there are times when I totally identify with the frustration and the anger. I'm somebody who I love politics. I love going to lectures. I love going to live events. And there's so many of those things that I've missed out over the years. And now they're all online. And I'm like, wait, why were we doing this all along? This would have been great. But at the same time, I think back to, 10, 11 years ago when I knew nothing about chronic illnesses, and I wasn't a bad person or whatever, but I had moments where I could be a total asshole. Like, come on, I have to approach everything with a little bit of humility, because prior to experiencing this myself, I don't think I would have understood what somebody else was going through. And I don't think I would have had any idea about the sort of pain and isolation and difficulties that you encounter when you're dealing with a chronic illness. And so I try and keep that in mind, at least when I have people who I know care about me and want the best for me, and maybe just don't always get it. I try to give them the benefit of the doubt. It's hard, because that's, sometimes we get those comments that are honestly really hurtful, especially from people that are close to us. But, it's very difficult, but I think that's part of this just broader sense of acceptance and dealing with coping. You had this quote in the book, which I loved, which was, "I'm not sure I want to be that accepting. I don't want to forget the old me, what I still think of as the real me." And I read that and I was just like,
Yeah.
this feels like something, if I were more articulate, that I would have written myself.
Yes, that's actually an actual quote from my journal that I was writing in at the time, in the first years of my illness. And my editor wanted to edit that passage a bit, and I was like, "No, this is from my journal. I want it, this is raw. It's exactly what I was thinking at the time." But I think, even 18 years in, that's still a struggle between acceptance and hope. And, there's still this worry that full acceptance of your current situation means giving up. And, you have to learn that this is you also, that you're not just one version of yourself.
Or there's this sense that it's somehow a negative thing that you've changed because of your chronic illness, which is inevitable. Like, of course you're going to change, because you're dealing with this completely life-changing diagnosis. That makes total sense that things would change. But I think there's often a perception that if you haven't retained every single facet of your previous personality, to whatever extent that means, like, that you have somehow succumbed to, like, the chronic illness has taken over. It is your identity, whatever the hell that means. And
one.
Right. Yeah. You've given up. You've admitted defeat, as opposed to saying, you know what? Yeah, I didn't choose this, but in some ways, maybe I am a nicer and more understanding person, and maybe I'm not as brash and arrogant as I used to be. At least that's my case, not assuming
that's definitely the case for me too. I think, you don't realize how much you don't know. And, certainly pre-illness, I think, yeah, same for me. I was certainly much more quick to judge other people. And, that's the other thing about chronic illness. It does make you more empathetic, and it makes you more understanding of other people, because you start to realize, okay, no one understands what I'm going through. And guess what? They're going through stuff too that I don't understand. And that was really eye-opening for me, to realize, because my life had, honestly been pretty easy up until that point. I mean, I just felt like I had problems like anyone, but, I was happy with each stage that my life had gone through. And, you know, I had my struggles, but I was content. And suddenly living with chronic illness is such a huge shift. But the other thing I write about in the book about the old me versus the new me is also like I was, I've always thought of myself as very much an extrovert and very social, and now I still enjoy social interaction, but it exhausts me. So, and I've learned, and this has been a real like light bulb over the head thing for me just the last couple of years, that in some ways I've become more introverted according to the definitions of it, because it's being alone that revives me and allows me to recuperate. And you know um, and that was really hard for me to accept for a while.
I
you know
agree, because I think I had always seen myself similarly as this like social extroverted person who's, organizing things and throwing parties. And then
right.
if there were moments when I would deliberately choose to stay home because I needed to rest, I often wondered, wait, what does that say about me? Like, what have I become if this is what I'm choosing? And I think now I've seen myself develop this appreciation for being able to be alone. I can sit with my thoughts. I can be on a couch and not go crazy with boredom or find the need to constantly distract myself. I'm okay with finding something interesting to do in my apartment and doing a puzzle or sitting and listening to music. And these quiet moments when I often thought in my previous life I was always, studying or running cross country or doing some kind of sport or activity. I was going all the time. And now I've found that like, I actually enjoy some of these pauses, which I don't think I would have ever expected.
Yeah, same here. And I think I've also learned that, it's not good or bad. This is just, we're all a mix, and it's okay. It's interesting because the current situation has been good and bad. My husband and son are home 24/7 with me, so I'm missing some of my alone solitude. Luckily, my husband is very good natured about this. I think he knows not to take it personally, but I need that quiet solitude, like with the house entirely quiet and not having to worry about anyone but myself. That has definitely come with chronic illness. Um, but on the other hand, with what's currently going on right now, I miss things like my book groups. And I was supposed to be in Vermont last weekend with my mom for this big book event that we go to every year. And we were missing that. And everybody was on Facebook, sharing photos of past years and reminiscing. And I really, truly missed going this year. But there's also a relief in knowing that I don't have to put myself out and, risk wearing myself out. And, I don't know that healthy people would understand that necessarily, that I'm relieved I don't have to do things right now. But, seeing that empty calendar, it's been very upsetting for my mom. She was telling me to look at the calendar and see it empty. She's normally very busy and active with her friends and everything. And for me, seeing that empty calendar with all the medical appointments crossed out, and nothing to do, it's a relief that I don't have to worry about resting ahead of time and whether I'll feel okay to go and what happens if I don't feel okay that day. There's always this extra level of stress with chronic illness, and when you're interacting with the outside world, and worrying about, will I be able to manage it? What will the repercussions be? And we each make our own decisions about that. But the absence of all of that extra outside pressure is kind of a relief, even though I miss some of it.
Yeah, I totally identify that with that because I think I've realized over the past couple of weeks just how sensitive I am to stress. I think we're all sensitive to stress in some way, but maybe my level is just a little bit higher. My tolerance is different. And what I found over the course of the quarantine is that living in this weird state of flux has been confusing and strange, but at the same time, I have eliminated a lot of the expectations that I normally would have put on myself to do certain things or to achieve a certain activity level
Right.
because we're all at home. So it
Yeah.
doesn't matter.
I think you just put your finger on it. It's expectations, and to know I've actually got altogether 4 different video chat type things came up for today, which is like mind blowing because I haven't been doing a lot of this really. We did an Easter thing with my family, and we did one dinner with friends on Zoom, but I haven't been doing a lot of this, but for some reason today it's like the calendar's suddenly full and I'm going, what's going on? But yeah, there is that extra, level of stress and pressure about how you'll be able to handle it and
Yeah,
let people down if you have to cancel at the last minute.
gosh, that's like the worst. That tension between like wanting to do something and understanding that if you back out, you might be letting somebody down. So how much advance notice do you give? And is there that like small sliver of hope that like things are going to turn around at the last minute and you're going to be able
Yeah.
to pull through
Yeah.
and push yourself? And like, when do you push? When do you rest? It's just, it just like envelops everything in my life, that like mental tension between how much do I push myself, how much do I rest, and how do I integrate the outside world's expectations and my desire to not bail on my friends and the people I care about and let people down. It's
Right.
complicated.
It's more of that constant vigilance that's required of us. We're taking all of that into account. Yeah, I'm lucky. I've got some very understanding friends, but I think I mentioned in the book when I'm in a situation like that, like maybe I've got book group scheduled for the evening and I haven't been feeling well all day, but I'm like I really want to go and my friends are expecting me and we made plans to have dinner first. What should I do? But then I find that if I finally make the decision, nope, I don't feel well, I have to cancel, and then I feel nothing but relief, then I know I made the right decision. If instead of being disappointed, I'm just like, oh, I can stop worrying about it now. Lie down on the couch. It's that feeling of relief is a sign to me that I made the right choice. But it's hard. It's hard to balance those needs.
It is. And I think one thing that I've learned over the years is that I used to approach fun and exciting things with this sense of scarcity. Like, I'm
Right.
sick. Nothing fun is ever going to happen to me again. So I have to do this one thing that I got invited to do, and I have to do it 100%, and I have to stay the entire time, and I have to be super engaged the whole time because otherwise I'm never going to have fun again. And then I'd get home and I'd just be like exhausted and crashing for like 2 weeks. I'm like, why did I do that? So once I started integrating smaller doses of social interaction or fun events throughout my life, then I didn't have to wait for that like one single thing to build everything up to.
Right. Right. Yeah. So it is nice that so much is online now.
Yeah, that does help. So you have one chapter that I really loved, which was about celebrating everything. So what are some of the things you've been celebrating?
Oh gosh, yeah, that's something that, well, my mom did that when I was a little kid. The house would be decorated for every minor holiday. We've got home movies of like, these huge parties with the whole family over for like my dance recital at the end of the summer, So here at our house, well, right before all this started, we had our annual St. Patty's dinner. That was the last time we were all together sitting around the table. My father-in-law turns 95 next week, so we've had to be really careful about him. He's not in a nursing home or assisted living. He's still in independent living. So, but I called him today, and he is so bored and so lonely, and it's really starting to get to him. But that was the last time we were all together, was St. Patty's Day. We had our big corned beef dinner, and you know, Easter, even though we were just stuck here, normally none of our family lives here where we live. So normally any holiday, any major holiday, we're traveling to see family. So we were stuck here at the house, but we did, we got Easter baskets for each other. Went into the drugstore with our masks on and everything and gloves and picked out some treats, and did the Easter baskets. And my family's Ukrainian. So Easter is the holiday when we have the big, like, traditional feast with all the traditional Ukrainian foods. So we did the best we could on our own with that. There's usually a Ukrainian church in the area that does a big spring bazaar, sells all the food. So we had to make a lot of things ourselves. And we did, I posted in a local Facebook group to see where we could get fresh pierogies. And my husband went running out, with his mask to the one grocery store that was said to have local fresh pierogies. And we did have my college son, who I mentioned to you earlier, hasn't been living with us. But he and his girlfriend did come over for Easter dinner, but, we set up a separate table for them. It was like reinstating the kids' table. They were sitting, we were at the dining room table, they were at another table, but, we try to make the best of things. And it really does help, especially when the kids were younger, to celebrate the little things. I was just thinking the other day that I haven't made enchiladas in a while, which is a family favorite. And we should do one of our Mexican nights. So we're overdue for that. Oh, I just missed Cinco de Mayo, didn't I? Or is that today?
Today.
Oh, shoot. We just ordered Mexican Sunday night, so.
Well, so I have one last question because we're coming
Sure.
up on an hour, but is there anything else you wanted to talk about? Anything else you wanted to share?
I think we covered, the highlights, the points in the book that I think are most important.
That's great. Well, I'm super appreciative of all the work you've put together. I'm so amazed at you. Self-publishing a book just in general is incredible, and then you've been able to do it with a chronic illness plus taking care of your family and everything else you do. That's so amazing. Thank you so much for everything you've done.
I appreciate that very much. It's been an all-encompassing project for sure. But I'm glad I did it too.
And your positivity and just sense of optimism and joy is always such a delight on Twitter. I always love seeing what you're grateful for every day. It's such a nice change. Even when I feel like shit, I can log on to Twitter and I can see a little glimmer of excitement and hope. Yeah. So final question, which was sure, one of my favorites in the book, but what are you looking forward to?
Let's see. Well, like I said, this is an unusual day because there's actually two things on the calendar: this interview, and this evening, a few of my closest friends and I are going to do a game night on Zoom. So, probably just be about an hour, but we're going to attempt to play a couple of games over Zoom with, these are the closest friends that I haven't seen in a while. So it'll be really nice. Looking forward to that very much.
That sounds great. That sounds like such a blast. I'm so glad you get to interact with all your friends still and stay in touch with everybody.
Yeah, it'll be fun.
Awesome. And again, so Finding a New Normal, Living Your Best Life with Chronic Illness by Sue Jackson. I feel so excited. This is like a little book tour.
Well, I really appreciate this. And, you've done such great tweets and other posts about my book. And I really appreciate that.
Yeah,
that's a lot.
Well, it's important to spread the word, and I think it's so great that we can all support each other, especially as a lot of us are trying to find new career paths and figure out what to do with our lives. I'm always so appreciative of people who found a way to turn something that they probably weren't expecting to happen to them into something positive and share their experiences with others. So thank you for everything you're doing. It's great.
You're welcome. And that's one of the things I think I end the introduction of the book that way. This is not the life I envisioned. But, we've made the best of it. And, taken a different path, but it's turned out to be a good path.
Absolutely. Well, you're great. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this for me. This is so exciting.
Thanks, Schultz.
Okay.